I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. A little bit of a programming note for the next few weeks or so. We're doing a Joe and Charlie Big Book study group, which for Steve and I have been a big part of our recovery, John too. And because John is hosting this and doing it on the night we typically tape it, John is a little overwhelmed. So you won't hear John for a little bit of time, but he'll be back when Joe and Charlie is done. And maybe I could rope him in for something. And I'm hoping maybe we could rope in some people to sit in that third seat from time to time. But tonight, just Steve and I. Steve, what's shaking? How's the recovery going? Staying sober one day at a time?
Hey, Matt, recovery is a beautiful thing. It's better than where I came from. So every day I wake up, I'm thankful that I'm sober. I'm thankful for the life that my program and my sobriety has given me. And, part of that was last night. I mean, I didn't go to the Monday night meeting, which you and I both go to. And part of that was because I was able to go down and babysit my 1-year-old grandson and stay for dinner with his mom and dad. And while they went to an appointment, they're expecting another baby.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's fantastic that I was able to get down there, and I spent like 4 hours with him, just me and him, one-on-one time. So those are the things that sobriety gives me that I can't even quantify. I can't tell you like how much they mean to me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. When I have time with my kids and can be present, they're great memories, even if they're small things.
Right.
And that's kind of our topic tonight and this was something that was very, very difficult for me when I first came into the program and got sober, which was balancing through having a family, having kids, especially if the kids are younger, especially if you have multiple kids. How the hell you do this and still find time for the things you need to do in recovery?
Tough.
And I know you were kind of in that situation. You've had kids. I don't know exactly the ages, especially when you first came in.
Yeah, 5 and 2.
Okay, so that was about what my kids were.
Yeah. Yeah, 5 and 2. Wasn't easy for me. I struggled with that. Anybody who goes back, I don't know where it was. My story on this podcast, episode 3 or 4, whatever that was. But yeah, it's something I struggled with when I first came in because they were so young, because I was such an unproductive husband. I was an unproductive father during those years, because those 5 years when my son was born up to the time I went in the room, that's when I went in the rooms in 95. He was born in 90. Those were my worst alcoholic years. Those were my worst drinking years. So yeah, it was a tough struggle for me to balance that.
I stopped drinking about 2 days. It was 2 days after my youngest was born. So she really hasn't been around me drinking, but that left, I think, a 2-year-old. I think my other son was, I don't know how old he was. He was in kindergarten, so maybe 5 or 6.
Right.
So these are real young kids. And I was going to a lot of meetings. I ramped it up. I remember ramping up to a lot of meetings. But I was out of the house 4 or 5, sometimes 6 nights a week, and my wife is putting babies to bed. That didn't go over well. For a long time.
No, really, really difficult. Although, when I came in, I had a pretty low bottom. I sort of laughed and I said it wasn't that low, and it wasn't, because I lived in a house and I wasn't homeless, and not a lot of the really bad stories. And I've always said, well, if you really want to know what my bottom looked like, talk to my wives at the time, because I went through 2 bottoms with 2 different wives. They'll tell you what it was really like. And but you're right. The thing for me is that I think my wife was so relieved that I wasn't drinking. She was doing so much of the heavy lifting anyway that it wasn't unusual. Typically, I was drinking in the house, and I would always find a reason. I was sort of semi-self-employed. And I would find a reason to go down and work in the basement, work on my computer stuff. And so she did most of this childcare stuff anyway. And so, when I was out meetings, she knew I wasn't downstairs drinking. And Yeah, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It's something I struggled with because, I've shared about it before. Early on, it's a little bit of a dance. It's a little bit of a balancing schedule, if you will. And let's face it, the most important part, and it's something that I struggle with, is your sobriety. Because let's face it, if I wasn't sober, then I wasn't part of that whole relationship. I wasn't part of that whole deal. Like, I wasn't doing my share. I was there, and I would certainly do some kid stuff, but I wasn't there enough. And certainly by the time I got into the rooms, I'm sure my wife didn't trust me at all. So it was difficult. It was a difficult time.
I will tell you what was a challenge for me, because not knowing anything about AA. So if you're new to the program, although Steve and I are part of a 12-step group, I'm not espousing one thing over another. Lots of different ways. The way I got sober was through a 12-step group, and I went to meetings and people encouraged that. Here's part of the challenge, because I don't know if I had a lot of confidence back then to say no to things. But there are a lot of people in the program who will also push certain things. Go to more meetings. You need to do this. You need to put your sobriety above everything. And sometimes you run into a lot of people who maybe either have kids who are grown or don't have a family at all. And I always found that those people had a very difficult time understanding what I was going through.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that too, because what happened with me is, it's the same thing. And it's not that those people don't have good advice. It's not that anything they might tell you isn't a good idea, but there is a difference. I mean, we do see that in this program, there are a lot of people who either don't have kids or whatever. They weren't married, or they're married. I don't know, different circumstances. And they didn't understand. But that hurt me, Matt. I mean, you survived that, right? You came through that sort of almost the exact same. We were probably very close to the same age when you came in and I came in the first time.
Yeah, I was 38. I think we were. Right. I think you've said you were 38. I was 38.
Yeah. So we were the same age. Basically, you had one additional kid, and you navigated it quite well. I did not. I mean, I just came in, I did my meetings, I quit drinking, and then I told the story before, but then I really thought that what I was supposed to do was go back home and be a good husband and a good father. And I did, and I won't tell my story here, but I got away from meetings, and it took me a long time, but eventually I drank again, okay? You've never done that because you got involved differently than I got involved. And plus I think we have different personalities, right? I still struggle, not as much today, but certainly back then too. I struggled with people telling me what to do. So if you told me I needed to go to 5 meetings of the week, I was more likely to just go tell you to fuck off, really. Like, oh, screw you. You don't know what I need, right? You're not me. That was my attitude back then. So it's not so much today. I know today that people who tell me things, even if I don't like to hear them, are usually telling me those things with the right thing in mind, right? The proper thing. I hear stuff I don't want to do all the time, and I don't take it personally or offensive or have any offense to it anymore.
I will tell you what helped me is my sponsor was in a very similar situation to me. His kids were a little bit older, but not by much. So he was in a very similar situation. I hung tight with people like you and John. So I would say people like John and my sponsor were pretty influential. And John especially would focus on, you have to be good to your family first.
Yeah.
There were some times going to Joe and Charlie where he sent me home, where something was going on at home. He's like, nope, you don't have to be here tonight. Go home. That there was a group of people who kind of got that family environment, who are in a similar situation of, yes, recovery comes first. You also have to balance out that you do have young kids and a wife at home and an early career, and you have to make some decisions. And if you have a question of what you think you should do, call somebody and ask for help. I was really good at surrounding myself with people who thought that way, but also had good sobriety. And I could listen to people give me direction in a meeting. There were also people who would tell me, nope, you're not doing it right. You're only going 5 nights a week. You should be doing a 90 and 90. Right. And if you don't, you're gonna drink again.
Yeah.
And that pissed me off.
No,
I didn't want to hear that.
Me too. It always pissed me, like, how many days do you drink a week and all that kind of stuff, right? And again, maybe it was decent advice, but I will tell you that when I first came in, just like you, I did a lot of meetings. I mean, I was out of the house just about every night. Once I ramped it up, but like not in the beginning. In the beginning, I didn't know anything about AA either, and I sort of walked in there, and again, I wasn't. Yeah, I really didn't want to be there, and that was the other thing. Like the first time through, I did not want to make any AA friends, and I mean that honestly. I just did not want to. It's like I was willing to go to those meetings and hang out with you guys in order to not drink. But that was probably the extent of it. That was all the room I was going to give you at that point. Like, I don't, these people are too weird. They're not like me. They don't understand me. I went through a lot of that stuff early on. But I went to a lot of meetings because I was really struggling. And one of the things I did learn, and I've told this to my sponsees, especially early on in the first time and early on after I relapsed and I came back, is that I learned that when I got out of sorts, what I needed to do is go to a meeting. And there was plenty of times that I would get in a fight with one of my wives, right? I've been married twice. Either one, like I'd get in a fight with them, and that what I would do after I would storm out of the house, I would find the meeting. And the nice thing, we've talked about living where we live, is there's always a meeting. There's always a meeting I could drive to within a couple hours, right? Like happening within a couple hours or within a 45-minute drive, I can go find a meeting somewhere. And that's what I did. That was my MO. It's like when I was really pissed off, and I would go to a meeting, and listen, nobody ever told me to pipe down. I shouldn't say that. They did. But for the most part, I always felt like I'd go to a meeting and I can vent. Like I would be so pissed off, and I'd vent about what's going on and how stupid my wife was, and all those typical things that many alcoholics and people who are struggling do. Today I don't need to do that, but back then it's what I needed to do, and it's it helped me, and a lot of people allowed me to do it. So I did what I needed to do, and like I said, but the first time through I struggled.
Give me a little bit of the why here. If people are new, you're not part of a 12-step program. Could be sober, could be whatever, but your tradition is not in the 12-step world. What is it that people in the 12-step world will say to a newcomer? You have to go to a lot of meetings. How come?
Well, I think that I think people say that because I think they realize that I think they're afraid that if people get away from going to meetings, and if they're not connected, if they're not in the program, that maybe they'll pick up and drink again. And that in order to sort of get yourself set in that program, and again, I can't argue at that. But I did a lot of stuff. Like if I look back at everything I did in my first time through, I had a small group. It wasn't a big group, but a small group of people who were very important to me. And I did all those things. I went to lots of meetings. I went to big book studies. I went to small group studies, 4 or 5 people at people's houses. Like I did a lot of good stuff, but I wasn't totally engaged in it. I wasn't totally connected to it. So I think when people tell me, I've never been a big fan of you got to go to meetings every day, even with newcomers. I mean, unless I really like they have too much time on their hands. Like if they're not working. Right? If you're like unemployed and you're new in sobriety, you probably should go to meetings every day, right? Just so you have something to do. But if you're working a full-time job and you have to be there and you're trying to balance some type of life, then yeah, it'd be nice if you can go to a meeting every night. But just like you said, I just think people say that because they're concerned. They want you to succeed. And they feel like the more you get connected, the better off it'll be. And today, I know that's true. I tell anybody that I work with today, you need to find your group of people. And it took me years. Like I found John too, and I agree. John does have a big family angle to sobriety, and he's always been that. And that's not true. It's not true of some of my favorite people in AA. Like they don't have that same take on AA. They'll tell you, well, you need to do this before, but But today I could deal with both of those type of people. And I didn't know John early. I didn't know John the first time I came in. I didn't meet him until the second time through. And even that was, it was a couple of years in before I met him.
Yeah, John has a strong family background to the point of there's been some Joe and Charlie stuff that we have to skip this week. Why? Because I have a family thing. I'm traveling. When I come back, Mare and I are going to do dinner. It has to be on Wednesday night. So let's figure out what we're going to do to work our way around it. Right. But I also think that what I said there is part of it. It's not, you're not going to do anything because of the family. You're going to work around it. You work around the stuff in AA. You work around the stuff in the family. So if something comes up, it's a little bit of give and take. It's not 50-50. Sometimes AA will have to be 90%. Sometimes the family's 90%.
Right. You
don't want both to be 10%.
You hit on something that I always talk about, and that's the subject. One of the subjects that come up in AA meetings often is balance. And I chuckle at that because I always say, if you're new, first of all, there shouldn't be a balance. Like you said, it's not a 50-50, right? So, and all depends on where you're at. And when you're new, certainly the big thing is you do have to pay attention really closely to your sobriety. And there shouldn't be like, I have to balance things. Nope, you have to pay attention to your sobriety, but you also have to take care of home. So there is that type of walk with it. We're heading into this with Joe and Charlie. Like I told my wife, and my wife knows it. And listen, my wife's not in the program, right? Your wife's not in the program. She doesn't love the fact that I do as much as I do sometimes. So I said to her just yesterday, I'm like, honey, we're hitting that point now where I am going to be really booked over the next several months with AA stuff. So what I say to my wife today is, let's make sure that we look at what we want to do. Now we record this podcast around 6:30 on a night. My wife loves to go to bed early. But I told her, I'm like, listen, we'll be done with the podcast by 7:30 at the latest. If you want to watch a show, that's typically when we would start watching a show anyway. So I tell her, like, it really doesn't impact what we can do on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. Now, tomorrow's different. Tomorrow I leave. I'm gone the whole night because of Joe and Charlie. It's a long night for us.
And it's a long drive. It's a longer drive than it used to be.
Right. And for me, that's a 30-plus minute drive. I got to get there a few minutes early. So, so it's an all-night thing. I eat dinner early, I leave, I come back, and my wife's in bed. But today I know that, okay, I'm going to be doing this, so I pay attention to making sure that I take care of some of that time. It's just my wife and I don't have kids anymore in the house. So it's like, okay, let's make sure we do something. So tomorrow we will. Tomorrow we'll do something during the day. I have the ability to do that during the day. And we'll go out and do a couple things. And, tonight, if my wife's up to it, when I get done here, I'll see if she wants to watch the show. So I pay close attention to that today. And I always say that I try to give my wife or anyone quality time, right? And last night I missed that meeting. We're just talking about, right? Last night I missed that meeting because my son had asked me, "Hey, do you want to come down and watch our grandson?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to." I love the fact that I'm able to do that, and I'm able to do that because of this program. I'm able to do that, and he wants me to do that, and I'm going to do it again in a couple weeks too. And it's just a great way, and I can balance things out. And matter of fact, I'm going to do it on a Wednesday. And he said, "Hey, do you want to come back down Wednesday the 25th?" And I'm like, "Hey, I got a tight schedule on there. Like, if I come down, I got to be out of there by 5:15 so I could be, at John's house." And we talked about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I can do that. We can make sure that happens." So I'm still able to do that, go down there, and then also take care of the Joe and Charlie, which is part of my program.
Because I'm nervous about the drive. Whenever I find that one of my but things I'm not crazy about is when I know I have something set in the schedule. Mm-hmm. I get that Sunday night blues for my job, not because I don't like my job, but because I have to be up at a certain time. And left to my own devices, I just want to do whatever I want to do whenever. And the whole idea of maybe a 30-minute drive to this place on the side of a mountain that John lives, where I think it's about a half hour off of pavement to get there, because he lives in the absolute middle of nowhere, where we could get out of our car. And it's a more than 0% chance that a bear is going to kill us as soon as we get out of that car.
Yeah.
It really is. It's out there a little bit. It's exactly.
No question about it that we could end up dead.
And that's the type of place he likes to live, where, while where humans are encroaching on nature's order, that's where he likes to be. And I get nervous of, damn, that's a 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
And then it's several hours there, and then another 30-minute drive home.
Yep.
I get in my own head with that, and then I start thinking something like a Joe and Charlie comes once a year. Mm-hmm. It's a few months, one day, and it is a transfusion of plasma into my veins of sobriety. You pick it up a level, even just that one day, because you're with the same group of a small group of guys every single week, and you're diving deep into the book, and you're sharing more than you would even at a meeting. And this is sobriety on steroids, so it is an investment in time. And I try to explain that to my wife, and she's at the point now where eyes are crossed of like, I don't care.
Right.
You're making a bigger deal of this than I'm okay.
It's interesting. You know what else is, and again, we'll diverge into a little bit of Joe and Charlie talk here, but this is like, I mean this for me. The reason why this is so important to me, this is like an all-star game for me. For like when I go to this thing, like the reason why I'm doing this Joe and Charlie is not because I need to go through the big book. Although I love going through the big book, it's because there's a group of people in that meeting. You, me, John, David, Jimmy, like all these people that Tim. I love. And Timmy just decided to join us. Like that was the icing on the cake for me to get all those people in there. That is, like you said, we'll walk out of there with like just huge uplift and a boost of sobriety. And you really will. It's like it just puts your program on fire. And the truth is, right now, it really comes at a good time for me. It's like I do feel like my program. I don't want to say it's on autopilot, but I'm sort of in a program or a schedule of what I do. But the other thing I just did, I just became GSR for my Friday night group, because I wanted to change some stuff up. I wanted to do something different. So I took a service commitment, and that's the other thing I do, right, in this program. I took a service commitment. But that's another thing, right, that's going to put me out of the house or on a Zoom, on a Zoom meeting.
Those can be long.
Right, and that's okay.
Depending on if there are certain people who decide that they want to fight,
I get
it. It can be long.
I get it, and that doesn't bother me. It's once a month. I can handle that. And again, as long as on my schedule, I can plan around it, and I could make sure that I take care of the things I need to take care of, and I go to there. So, but I love getting together. I love doing these Joe and Charlies. I haven't done one for a couple of years because of COVID, and it's going to be nice to get back into it.
I was realizing that. I'm like, wow, this was before COVID, and I think part of this is where I start to feel a little bit nervous is being at my house all the time. Our buddy Arlena from the One Day at a Time podcast had a picture on Instagram yesterday where she's sitting in her car with the restingest as resting bitch face as you could ever see. And the caption was, I was told I have to go back to therapy because I have decided not to leave my house because of the pandemic for 3 years. That just reading that, her look on her face is, I got comfortable just being at home and not being around people.
Right.
And I have to do something about that, and I don't want to. And that was my cue that I need to talk to somebody about this.
Yeah.
But the look on her face was everything you needed to know about it. I could identify with this puss that she had on her face.
And listen, again, everybody has their own opinions, but, like it or not like it, there's a lot of sick people out there. And whether, no matter how you want to believe it, I know we just got through with the COVID stuff in this house in early December. And not only that, but just your regular sickness, colds and coughs, and the flu is out there and everything's out there. And I don't love that stuff, but I will tell you, like you, we've been locked up for so long that I go out now. I need to go to my meetings. and even the Joe and Charlie, which will make us all put us in close contact with a small group of people. But it's like, hey, I'll roll the dice and we'll do what we can do. I agree that we need to get out there. We need to do stuff. You work from home. I work from home. There's not a lot of interaction. Like, we're not going into offices anymore. So it's really important that we, interact with other human beings.
The only time I get in my car to go somewhere, because I fill up my tank every 4 weeks, every 3 weeks.
All right.
That is to go to the gym, to go to my son's game, to, the gas station, the grocery store.
Grocery store, right.
I'm in this chair that I'm in right now all the time.
Yeah.
I work here, and when I work here, I just put the microphone to the side and I do something else.
Is that my same setup here, right? My microphone sits to the side. When we get done here, I unplug my headphones, and I move it all out of the way, and it's the same thing. It's the same setup, same place I move, when I come in to do my work in the day.
So you kind of have to learn for me, it's been, how do I learn to re-enter in a way that I used to and get comfortable with re-entering the way I used to? And I think that's part of the nerves here, is I haven't done a lot of this being out of the house, which was the norm. So it's not that big of a deal.
So Matt, wait, I just want to sort of bring us back to this topic. Talk about your kids today. So you came in, your kids were young. They were about the same age, right? So You've been in what, 12 years? How long? 11? How many years?
Be 9 in March.
9 years. Okay. So your kids are 9 years into this. How are they doing?
They're doing pretty well. I have found that the kids are more engaged with me in a way that they weren't before. My 10-year-old daughter just came down with dinner. I wasn't planning on eating it here, but she thought enough of me to come down, bring dinner, bring me a drink, and as she walked away, she blew me a kiss.
Nice.
Now, it was 9 years ago, so that's a long time, but I don't remember them interacting, and it was a very gradual thing, and they are much more engaged with me now than they were before. The younger kids sometimes have a hard time with me going to meetings. Right. I don't want you to leave.
Yeah.
And I learned to tell them, I go to meetings so I can be a great dad. But you already are a great dad.
All right.
I can continue to be a great dad if I go to these meetings.
It's interesting because we have some grandkids who live in New Jersey, and they come up and spend time with us. And a lot of times while they're here, I will go to a meeting. And just recently, they've been inquiring about where Papa goes. And so it's going to be about time. The youngest is 5, and the older is 8. Matter of fact, that's who was ringing my phone, was their dad. And we're heading down there this weekend because they were sick with the flu, so we didn't get to have Christmas with them. So we're heading down. And I think it's about time to probably talk about that, right? And let them know where Papa goes and explain to them best we can at their levels. Because, it's interesting because I talk AA with my kids often, right? Often. And we talk about, it was interesting. My daughter-in-law was up here, and she has a high-risk pregnancy going on. Everything's good, but she has a high-risk pregnancy. And so they were up here over the weekend, and I was talking with my son, and we were doing something, and I found out later that my wife was talking to our daughter-in-law and asking her questions like only a woman could ask a mom, right? Only a mom can ask a mom. And I was down with my son Monday, and we were working on Monday. And after dinner, we were working on some shelving that he's doing in his basement. And he said, hey, I just want to let you know that Sue asked his wife how she was doing. And what she said was, oh, I'm fine. And my wife said, no, I want to know really how you're doing. And they had a talk about how she's doing. And I told my son, I said, you know something? That's a typical AA thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know who does that? Jimmy does that. Jimmy A does that all the time. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. And he'll look at you. He'll stare you right in the eyes and go, what do you mean you're fine? Like, he will question that four-letter answer. Oh, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm okay.
Oh, he can pick up on that body language, and he's so quiet, and he's good with silence.
Right, and he will just ask you, like, I'm not kidding. Like, he will make you think about it. Am I fine or am I not fine? My wife just did that with our daughter-in-law, and he said she appreciated, my daughter-in-law appreciated that somebody took the time to really inquire. And so I tell my son, well, that's what I do in my program, right? Like what Sue does. Now, see, this is the difference. That comes naturally to my wife. That's something I have to learn. All right. And that's okay too, because I'm able to do that today.
The thing about the people who I feel don't understand in the program, who might be a little pissy. So there's a little bit around, when you're around long enough, you can kind of see, I have seen where other people have failed at this point. The other thing that you have to remember when you're talking with people who are in recovery, they were alcoholics and you're always an alcoholic. Right. And lousy alcoholic behavior is still there sometimes, even when you're sober. So I've seen people in meetings bickering and we're arguing about this rule and stuff. And I sit there and ask, I'm like, well, I thought these people are supposed to be sober. Why are they behaving this way? Well, they still got the alcoholic underneath the surface, and sometimes that comes out. So sometimes people don't know how to communicate it effectively, and it comes out badly.
Not only that, we're human beings, right?
Right.
And when alcoholics aren't the only people who struggle with those things, right? You get into something that's emotional, whatever it is. A lot of people struggle with that. We have a different twist on it because a lot of times we would drink over those things. So that's the danger for us. But I look at it today as, we're just human beings. And some of us, have more character defects than others. So, I see that too. We had just had that Friday night at our Friday night meeting. We have some issues going on, and it became a heated discussion. And it didn't end well, right? It ended with a lot of people. It was funny. We ended with a lot of people being pissed off, and my phone rang off the hook Saturday with people calling up. And I told my wife, I'm like, oh my God, this phone is ringing today. People talking about what's going on and how, and it's like, hey, these are emotional things, right? People get connected to their program, to their meeting, to their spaces, whatever it is. And when change starts to happen, people struggle with it. And we're not, again, alcoholics aren't the only one who struggle with it. But you're right. You do look at some of these things, and we've seen it where people with long-term sobriety seem to struggle. And sometimes we just question, like, what's going on here? Why isn't there better communication than I'm seeing?
Well, now it's your turn. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a family, if you're dealing with these issues, how do you balance out everything, and does balance exist? If you're somebody who doesn't have a family and it's tough to empathize, how come it's tough to empathize? What would be your example? You can reach out at soberfriendspod.com, where there's a link to the email and to Instagram. And if you scroll to the bottom of the website, you can sign up for our newsletter. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the next upcoming episode, a sober article in the news, and some other stuff to keep you involved with the program. Steve, thanks for talking about this tonight.
Matt, my pleasure. I'm glad to join you. I think I'm going to bring a big stick or something tomorrow, because the rule is bear black, fight back.
Yep. Bear brown, lay down. We don't have any brown bears around here, so if we get attacked by a bear at John's house tomorrow night, it's going to be a black bear, so we're going to have to fight back. So I'm going prepared to fight tomorrow night. John would probably tell you, well, check the scat first, and that's how you can tell. Yeah. For me, I'm not looking for color. If I see a bear.
Taste it.
Yeah. If I see a bear, I'm going to behave one way, and that's probably run like hell.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
All right, Matt.
We'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.